everybody. It's time for CANNAfact Friday. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. We have a very exciting episode for you. We're going to do some really fun stuff. So, yeah, let's kick it off. If you are just joining us for the first time and you don't know what CANNAfact Friday is, it is a weekly live show right here on LinkedIn Live where we share a stat or a data point that we pulled from the previous week. Sometimes we look at older stuff, but for the most part, it's pretty fresh stuff. And then we provide commentary and we talk about what the larger meaning of that might be. My name is Adriana Hemans. I'm the VP of Strategy at ISA, which is a research firm based in Los Angeles, California. We specialize in a lot of different types of research, but cannabis is definitely my focus and the thing that I am most passionate about when it comes to research. And I'm joined by my co-host, David Palaschuk, who is the best-selling author of Branding Bud, the Commercialization of Cannabis, and the first book on cannabis branding, I might add. Hi, David.
Hey, Adriana. How are you today?
Awesome. Thank you.
I am excited about our 9th episode of CANNAfact Friday. Can't believe it's over 2 months that we're doing this already, but it's pretty exciting. And we are thrilled to have everybody join us every Friday as we talk through data points and contextualize them and invite some of the best brains in the industry to help us make sense of the data and sort of contextualize it. So that said, we're excited again to be here for episode 9. Today, we're going to be talking about some pretty cool things, some customer and consumer personas, as well as brand archetypes. So we'll get into that in a bit. But most importantly, what we find is your participation makes a big difference, meaning you, the audience. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat to the right side of your screen, and we'll go through it and we'll answer all your questions as best we can, and hopefully we'll have enough time and we'll be able to get through everything and answer most questions. And if we can't, we'll get back to you with some of the answers and do what we can, because again, we're trying to make most sense out of this and contextualize everything. So chat is really important. Please feel free to join us in the chat. Should we jump in? You want to talk about?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
We are going to do a little game called CANNAfact or CANNAfiction, and we're relying on the audience to chime in, submit your guesses, and play along with us. It'll be fun. So let's kick it off. First stat. And for this one, we want to have you guess what the percentage is. So we'll throw the question up on the screen. The question is, what percentage of US cannabis consumers say they received negative messages about cannabis from family members when they were growing up? So I'll give it a beat. Let people chime in. Put your guess in the comments. Do you think it's 60%? Do you think it's 70%? Do you think it's 80%? Do you think it's 100%? Go ahead and take a guess, and we will reveal the answer in just a moment. Also, I should mention that this data is from a survey that was fielded March 9th to March 15th of this year. So it was just last week that we grabbed this, and there were 667 answers. All right, we got some guesses in here. Linda guessed 80%. Will guessed 75%. We have another guess of 82%, 90%, all excellent guesses. We'll give it a couple minutes and let more people guess. Ooh, we got a lot of guesses. 90%. Cameo guessed 76%. Meryl guessed 99%. Yes, that is, I mean, that's not the answer, but that's a good guess. So cool. So David, tell me, did you receive messages from family when you were growing up about the negative impacts of cannabis? Did they warn you not to consume it?
You know what's funny? I won't get into this very long story, but my older brother was arrested in the 70s for one joint. And
Whoa.
And I think I shared with you, Adriana, once before, that was the first time I ever saw my father cry as they took my brother off to jail for one joint. So no, nobody ever needed to say anything to me when I was growing up. I knew that I just knew what my brother's arrest did to my father, so I stayed away. So in some ways, yes, I was given a message very clearly, negative messages about cannabis based on what took place. So I'm sure this happened with plenty of other people, and there's other experiences like that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's some really deeply held beliefs, and it takes time for people to change their outlook, as you know. I mean, I'm coming from the era when I was taking the DARE program in school in 6th grade. We had to write essays about how terrible drugs were, and they never actually said what it was, like what the drug was. They were just like, all drugs are evil, never do them, write an essay. It was very strange. And a police officer would come to our class. So anyway, any more guesses? One last chance to put your guess in, and then we'll reveal the answer. Da, 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 da. Should we do a drum roll? All
We need
right, let's
that.
kick it off. What is the answer? 63%, which, that actually seems a little bit low to me. I was surprised. I thought it would be higher, but 63% said they got messages from their family or authority figures while they were growing up about the negative impacts. I guess some parents just don't even bring up the topic, maybe. Or there's also some people who are, of course, of that younger generation, and maybe their parents aren't telling them, hey, don't smoke weed. So another little thing to note here, which is interesting, 72% said that their family has updated their thinking since that time, which is a huge change, right? If you think about sort of that generational awareness and acceptance. So yeah, thanks to everybody who guessed.
Absolutely. And the second kind of fact or fiction question for the day is, we're going to go to that slide in a moment. What percentage of U.S. cannabis consumers are open about their consumption? And when we say open, meaning they don't hide it. They share their consumption with those that are around them.
Mm-hmm.
So, just out of curiosity, and the questionnaire was taken at the same time with the same group. So,
Yeah.
just to fill that in as well. So, what percentage of U.S. cannabis consumers are open about their consumption? And I would also venture to guess this probably has something to do with where they live as well. Are they in a state where it's legal? Are they in a state where it's not? I'm sure those things come into play as well. So that said, does anybody have any guesses here?
Yeah, go ahead and throw your guesses in the chat, and let's see if you can guess what the percentage is.
Because this also has a lot to do with, we have Cameo with a 90%. This also has to do really with, how are people feeling about sharing what they do, and I think that has everything to do with the sentiment and the move toward normalization as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a reminder, this was fielded last week. So this is very current. These are the people that say they are open, the people that we surveyed who say they are open about their consumption to the people around them. So it might be coworkers, it might be family, it might be friends, but just, are you willing and able to share that information freely?
Right. You know what I think is intriguing here is that everybody first answered very high, and now many of these are much lower. So
Yeah, getting a little more conservative with their estimates.
that's right. So maybe people aren't so willing to share about their openness with cannabis consumption.
John guessed 75%. Rob guessed 55%. Lawrence guessed 20%. Wow, really,
Larry comes in at
really conservative estimate.
You're right.
Meryl guessed 20% to 35%.
All right. Well,
Should we reveal the answer?
and the answer is
84%.
yeah, are currently open about consuming cannabis with family members and community. And the mean age when they came out about their consumption is 30 years old. So I guess most of them have moved out of their parents' home and consider themselves adults and are now leading their own lives, I would guess. But it's interesting to see that, and hopefully that this 84% number shows that we're moving toward normalization, that people feel comfortable about sharing and talking about their consumption of cannabis, and that's where we want to see things head in that direction.
Yeah, it is interesting, I think, too. And they say people are staying at home longer, meaning like taking more time before they move out of their parents' home. So maybe this would look a little different about when they're fully out is influenced by that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Very interesting.
What do you think, audience? Was that fun? I love a good guessing game to kick us off. All
That's right.
right, let's get into the meat of the show.
Okay, let's do it. So over the course of time, Adriana, you and I have chatted about consumer personas and brand archetypes, and really, we've done that in a number of different places. And over the course of time, what we've gotten back on Clubhouse, on LinkedIn, wherever we've chatted live, um, there's a question, and that question really is, what's the difference between a brand archetype and a consumer persona, and how do these things come together?
Mhm.
So that said, we have been getting questions about this, and we thought we would spend some time today to go over what the difference is and what the consumer personas are of cannabis consumers, and what the brand archetypes are of the brands that are out there, and how these things start to make sense and engage with each other.
Yeah.
So that said, would you take us through an overview of ISA's?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And this is one reason why I was so excited to partner with David on making content and on working together, is because we have two different perspectives, but they're very complementary, right? So what I do at ISA is I help brands understand their target audience, who their customers really are, and David is looking at how can a brand present themselves to consumers in a way that makes sense to them immediately and helps to reinforce that brand identity. So this study that I'm sharing with you actually is something that we did in partnership with our parent company, Material, and it was Hillary DeCamp's team who spearheaded this. She is a world-renowned expert in segmentation research. What we did is we surveyed consumers across the United States from a variety of different different perspectives, right? Different ways of looking at the market. So some are just maybe a topicals consumer. Some maybe prefer edibles. Some of them have been smoking for years and years and years. And we looked at what are those different attitudes and behaviors. What is their style when they're shopping in a dispensary? There were many questions, not only related to cannabis, but also just about their lifestyle, what is important to them, how they sort of evaluate what choices to make. So it was very comprehensive study, and then we put it into these 6 personas, which are all driven by different goals and different ideas. I will share a couple of them with you that I think I connect with, because I feel like some of them you sort of see this, you read the information about who they are, and you're like, oh, I know that person. I know exactly who they are. You know, this is my friend, this is my neighbor, this is maybe my mom. And that's sort of like, those are the ones I want to pull out and talk about today. So the first one is our mature medicator. And this one, so I should also mention as a little disclaimer, you know, I like to give disclaimers, David, is that the demographics don't define them, right? It's defined by the perspective of their experience. So we can say that it skews female or it skews to be over 65, but that doesn't mean that everybody who's female or everybody who's over 65 would fall into this category. So just wanted to state that up front. The mature medicator is someone who's looking for relief from certain ailments, and they're turning to cannabis to do that. So it would be someone who is looking at topicals for pain relief, and that's what the mature medicator is driven by. The second one I want to talk about is the trendy toker. And this one I think is interesting because for these folks, there's really a performative aspect to their consumption. They want the trendy products, they want things that are on brand, they want to be seen holding it or carrying it or using it. And it's sort of part of how they present themselves to the world. These are like your Instagram influencers or the people who, you know, always want to try the hottest new thing. They're the ones who are in the nightclubs. They're the ones who are like very socially active. So those are just 2 examples. If you want to read more about them, you can go to the ISA website. It's isacorp.com. And then we have a link to the case study right at the top of the banner. It's called the Brand Builder's Blueprint. A little tongue twister. What do you think, David? Which one of these do you connect with immediately?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I personally connect with a little bit of all of them in some way. You know, there's I guess a trendy side. There's part of me that always wants to escape. There's the practical side of me. Um, you know, the everyday enhancer. There's a little bit of me in all of these personas.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because I do find a little bit of myself in all of these.
Yeah, I think so. Let me just share a little bit about how we sort of like the key inputs here. We looked at a bunch of different things. One thing, which I think is something that you really latched onto, David, is the additive or subtractive dimension, right? So what that means is if you are consuming cannabis in order to take something away, that would be subtractive. You are trying to take away pain, or you're trying to take away your social anxiety, just as an example, that would be subtractive. If you are adding it to enhance an experience, to enhance a social experience, to enhance, being creative or getting your chores done, that's an example of an additive experience. And that's just one of the dimensions we looked at. We also looked at their relationship to authority and the law. So, how willing are they to go outside of the box and break the rules? Which is interesting to see too, right? So, some of these have a lot of experience with cannabis. The everyday enhancer and the escape artist, they're both very experienced, very knowledgeable. They want to sort of nerd out on the category and learn about it, read about it. And they are examples of people who feel like they're part of the cannabis community. They are experienced and they don't care whether it's legal or illegal. They're going to consume it anyway. So that's another thing we looked at. We also looked at their comfortability shopping. So are they enjoying the shopping experience, or are they just trying to get in and get out? Do they want to browse? Do they want to look at products? Or they're just going to grab what they know they already want and be out the door? So, and that's really important, I think, too, for retailers to understand is who's going to be looking around, who just wants to be serviced and be out, and then also who is going to go out of their way to go to another retail location to get the products they want, or will they just grab an alternative?
You know, you're right, Adriana. You bring up a number of great points. You know, these bifurcated sort of aspects of this. You know, subtractive and additive. When somebody's reaching for their Aleve or their Tylenol, as an example, that's a very different mindset than if they're getting ready to paint or be creative or have sex or go for a jog or do any other sort of thing, which just might be different than that. I'm in pain, I need to alleviate it. You know, the other thing you mentioned too, which again is a bifurcation and really important, is the difference between a transactor and a shopper, right? A transactor typically knows what they want and they want to make the purchase and be on their way. It's coffee or gas, right? That's a perfect example. You know, whereas a shopping experience is really what's in front of me, what can I learn. You know, it's a combination of window shopping and knowledge seeking. So those come into play not only at the brand level, but also, as you said a moment ago, at the retail level as well, which is really important.
Well, we have a comment from Laura. I like the alliteration of brand builder's blueprint. Thank you. And we are also working together on a very exciting, which is a perfect segue. We're talking about shopping, looking at some shopping behaviors through a live in-person study. So look out for that. It's going to be really interesting when it comes out.
And a shout out to Lara Fortis as well, a dear friend. Yeah, so this is interesting. So Adriana, could you share a little bit more just with each of these different perspectives, how that might help a retail owner or a brand owner, you know, better appeal to these folks? And
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can give an example. So, like, we talked about the social consumption versus solitary consumption. That was another dimension that we looked at because we think that that will vary. It will help to define who these people really are. Is it something that's social, or is it something that they're doing alone, either to help them get something done, or for some other reason, maybe it's a pain relief thing. But we wanted to know, are they going to be responsive to messaging that's related to consuming socially? Probably not if they're the solitary consumer. So if you know who your target audience is, you're able to be more specific and speak to their actual specific experience, which of course is a lot more effective than just being super broad with your messaging.
One of the things I typically think about is, I often think of it as the can of core and the can of curious. Um, and those are really not only two different groups. There's many groups within those two groupings, um, but we tend to talk to them differently. Are these consumer personas both inclusive of both the core and the curious?
Yes, yeah, it is. So and that was a really important dimension too, is how comfortable they are with the category, how knowledgeable they are about the category, and how new they are to the category. And there's also another really interesting segment. It's not its own persona, but it is a part of the audience. And this is an audience that we've done some really cool research with, is what we call the boomerang. And these are people who consumed when they were in their teenage years or their young adult years. They are baby boomers, so they're over 65, and I think it's 57. They are returning now to the category. They're coming back to cannabis, sometimes driven by wellness reasons, sometimes driven by now it's legal in their state so that they can enjoy it again. So, and we did some really fun focus groups with these folks who, we were talking about stigmas earlier. They were talking about how they're not open about consuming because it's something that their family told them isn't okay to do, and they don't want their kids to know about it. They don't want their friends to know about it. So it can be very isolating, which is also what made it a very interesting group to talk to together, like as a group, because they became friends with each other and they started chatting and they started talking about going to the Pink Floyd concert or going to Hawaii and laying on the beach and smoking a joint. And it was just a very fun topic and a fun group. So just an example.
And to that point, we'll speak a little bit later about the nostalgic brand archetype, which appeals to exactly that group, the boomerangs, and it's very clear how there's very clear psychological research which show over time, that people harken back to certain parts of their life and become very nostalgic. And in our case, cannabis is probably a big part of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Yeah.
want to, do you want to talk about the consumer personas alignment?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's throw it up here. So we talked a little bit about the dimensions, right? So looking at these different sort of key indicators of where these people would fall, what persona segment they would fall into. And this is just a chart with two dimensions here. We have our social aspect on the x-axis, and then we have our additive and subtractive on the y-axis. And it's nice to have this visualization to see sort of how they're spread out in these different quadrants. This chart is also available on our website too, if you want to look at it a little bit more closely. But it's interesting to see how some are closer together in certain aspects, but then there are other key areas where they vary. And this the social versus solitary and additive versus subtractive is a good sort of landscape to look at it through.
Yeah. One thing too that just I'll throw out, I always use this analogy, and I think it works here. I always talk about the swimming pool, and the swimming pool being cannabis consumption. And those, let's say I'm in the pool and I'm trying to call all my friends into the pool. Each one of those friends is comfortable or not comfortable, depending on their ability to swim and their love for water around the pool. And so, really, we need to talk to these different personas, if you will, like we speak to people around that pool. So I may be in the pool, but one friend is dipping their toe in the shallow end and saying, "Oh no, it's too cold for me." While another friend is climbing up the diving board and getting ready to dive in. Another friend I might be offering um, a life preserver to, or meeting them in the shallow end. So I liken these types of conversations as you coax your friends into the pool. It's very much the same thing in the same way you need to speak to these different groupings. Because either they're going to dive in or they're not going to dive in, but you need to be mindful of who they are and how they consume um, and all of the aspects of their lifestyle surrounding it, and really meet them where they are, right?
I love that analogy, particularly for new entrants. Are you going to stay in the shallow end, or are you just like, let me have it? Like, let's get into the deep end immediately. So yeah, that's a fun one.
Right on. And I see that Lara just put up a note about understanding the difference between the archetypes and personas, and we'll get to that in a moment. I know time is moving fast this morning.
Yeah.
So personas are, just to clarify, the personas are the people, the consumers, their lifestyles, and the things that either attract or repel them to a product, let's say. And
Mm-hmm.
then momentarily we'll get into the archetypes and we'll talk about the products and what about them that cause somebody to be either be repelled or to be drawn to those products.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a very sort of timely conversation, right? Not only because we've been getting questions about it, David and I have when we've been speaking on these topics together, and that's what people want to understand. Like, how do these play together? How do they work together? It's sort of a way of understanding like there's a vast universe of experiences and perspectives, and this is one way to sort of like take a shortcut or categorize things so that it's easier to understand what we're doing.
Right. Absolutely. So should we jump quickly in with 15 minutes left? Should we jump into the brand archetypes?
Heck yeah.
Okay, let's do it. So let's start off. And again, there's a lot to cover here in 15 minutes. So I'll try not to rip through it like it's a presentation, but more of an interactive dialogue. And again,
And
please.
please send your questions too in the chat if you think of any that come up while we're going through this.
Absolutely. So what's a brand archetype? A brand archetype is essentially a shortcut to helping people understand the brand. Um, a great analogy for this is if I were to put up 5 seconds of music and it was classical, it was jazz, it was hip hop, and it was country, immediately within those 5 seconds, without even knowing what song you were listening to, you would get a pattern, you would get an understanding, you would have a quick riff on, do I like this or not? Am I attracted to this or not? It's almost like, again, probably a bad analogy, but it's your type. Are you attracted to the strong silent type? Are you attracted to tall, dark, and handsome? Are you attracted to short and sweet? It just depends, and really everybody has a type. Everybody has a thing they're attracted to or repelled from, and this is true with brands as well. So when we talk about brand archetypes really are that snippet of music that is either going to attract you or repel you. It's going to be, and again, for lack of a better analogy here, it's that craft paper wrapping on a product that says, and green soy ink that says, oh, that's a sustainable product. I know it. I'm into sustainability or I'm not. Right. And so you would reach for those things on the shelf. So a brand archetype is really that shortcut. And again, I think that snippet of music is probably the best example or analogy for it. You know it, and when you know it, you either like it or you don't. It's an immediate reaction. So why are brand archetypes important? Because it's that quick, short um, pulse that a brand can put out to a consumer and either attract them or not. Now, I've called out 14 cannabis brand archetypes, and we'll get through those in a moment. Um, I'll highlight all of them, and then I'll just dive into just a couple of them. But the first thing I want to say is they're not mutually exclusive. It's not a particular archetype. It could be many archetypes overlaid to create a brand. And a perfect example of that would be a Whoopi and Maya. And even though I know Whoopi and Maya's brand isn't out there anymore, Whoopi Goldberg being a celebrity, it's a gender-based brand directly.
What product did they make, David? I'm not familiar with that one.
They make well, they used to make topicals and lotions specifically made for women and benefits that women need, like a PMS cream or topical tinctures, those types of things. So in this case, they were not only a celebrity brand with Whoopi Goldberg, they were also a gender-based brand, specifically products geared toward women, and there was also a charity component to it as well. And so I'll run through, and why don't I do that really quickly? So the brand archetypes over the course of 12 years, going to every possible state and every possible place where cannabis is sold legally, I've noticed certain trends, and those trends are certain types of brands, and those brands appeal to certain types of consumers. And so just to read these off, there's a cultivator brand, a gender brand, a foodie brand, a health and wellness brand, a counterculture brand, and I should also say almost any cannabis brand is a counterculture brand by nature, but I just throw that out there. A prohibition brand, nostalgic brand, charity brand, luxury brand, value brand, art and design brand, regional brand, novelty and celebrity. And the truth is, there's probably more than 14 brands. And over time, I would even urge the listeners to come up with more brand archetypes to help us better understand what the brands are and how they better appeal to the consumers.
This is fun. Sorry to interrupt you. One question. Cultivator meaning like the people who are plant touching, grow the plant.
Mhm.
That okay.
Yeah, so I think a perfect example, and we could even go to the next slide. I think we've called out a couple there, but a cultivator brand in this case would be, I think the best example, or one of the best examples, would be the Jungle Boys or Sherbinski, or others that have, they are cultivators. They started off in the, in the black market typically. Here, so brand archetype number 12 is the cultivator brand. You're looking at on the left, you're looking at Sherbinski's. And Sherbinski, for those that don't know, he's really the geneticist, if you will, and the cultivator that focused on many of the sweeter strains like gelato and some of the other things that came out really early on. And now he's got a brand.
I'm kind of curious to hear from our audience too, if you don't mind, if anyone can think of other examples and throw them in the chat. I'd be curious to hear what we can come up with as a group.
Sure. And since we're limited on time, I'll be running through them while we might get some examples. Another example is art and design, and I think Saints Joints, based in Seattle, Washington, also selling in Oklahoma and some other states, does it best. What they've done is they have created joint packs. These joint packs have artists and designers that adorn the boxes. Larry Perigo, who is the owner of Saints, has worked very hard to really create a stable of artists, almost like.
I think Larry's with us. Larry, are you in the audience still?
Yep.
I think I saw his name a second ago.
But what Larry's done is basically created and worked very hard with many designers and artists, including tattoo artists, and then have created these boxes which are so desired that they're actually collectibles, and that they're pretty much sold out before they even come into the store because people are waiting for the drop. And he's even take this to a place where, hello Larry, he's even taken this to a place where he sold blank boxes, a blank white and black box, which was a DIY, which came with crayons and markers, and people actually created their own boxes and submitted them into the contest. And then the winner was part of the art and design collection. So these are two great examples of a cultivator brand and an art and design brand. Let's go to the next slide. There's two more we could dig into.
I'm wondering too if that art and design brand. So I'm thinking right now of Guild Extracts, who we had Claudio Miranda on the show. Just based on the logo alone and the design of the web page, it's like Art Deco and gold. Do you think that would qualify as an art and design archetype?
I don't, to be honest with you. That's just my take on it. Even though they've got a lovely brand and a lovely website, um, the difference in my mind is Larry is on a daily basis engaged with artists and designers, creating his look and feel, and really curating what the brand is. That's the difference to me. Brand archetype 2 is a celebrity brand. The last I checked, which was right around when Justin Bieber came into the market with Peaches, there were 54 celebrity brands, I believe, in the California market.
Yeah, like 27 people got into the business, celebrity, just last year alone.
That's right. That's right. And Mike Tyson just came out with his ear bites and all sorts of other things. But
Oh, and I got to do my plug for Viola because, okay, so I'm obsessed with Viola. My husband and I will drive all over the city of LA, and that is Al Harrington's brand, even though he doesn't have like his name on it, but he has names of different basketball players. Is that considered a celebrity brand?
yeah, I would think that's considered a celebrity brand. And to a certain degree, perhaps Viola has some really interesting strains too. So perhaps, somewhere between a focus on cultivation, but no doubt, Gary Payton, some of the other players that are being leveraged are definitely part of the celebrity movement. Um, I think it's interesting, like I said earlier, the 54 or so brands in the California celebrity brands in the California market are big, and whether it's that or whether it's a brand like which has Ellen DeGeneres and Chelsea Handler and Rosario Dawson and Gwyneth Paltrow, either on the board or as investors. These are things which are coming up and being spoken about quite a bit. My original thought, on celebrity brands, I was not a fan of celebrity brands. I initially was pretty down on them and just felt they were cashing in, that they weren't really bringing anything to the industry. They weren't adding any value to the industry. It was more of an endorsement than anything else. And my experience working with celebrities and endorsements, they can be pretty dangerous. Celebrities have been known to go off the rails and ruin brands from time to time. So I'm not typically a fan. But recently, what's come to mind and what's come to my attention is celebrities help normalize cannabis. And my feel is anything that helps normalize cannabis is a good thing. Whether I happen to like a celebrity or not is really besides the point. So where I come from these days is the more folks that have a following and the more folks that can normalize cannabis in a way that the masses accept it, I think they're doing us good. So I've actually 180 degrees on my celebrity stance. But so
Yeah,
come on.
and that's why we were talking about stigmas earlier and normalization, just because it's something that marketers, branders, people who are responsible for a brand identity, that's the underlying current underneath everything that we're doing, is making it culturally and socially acceptable. So these things are really related, and it's always something that marketers would have in the back of their mind, especially when they're people who are appealing to new entrants.
Mhm. Absolutely. The one thing I just want to touch upon for a moment, we spoke about nostalgia earlier. There are lots of brands that have come into the market that are based on nostalgia. For example, Vacation, Old Pal, Dadgrass. a few others which are really about harkening back, and even further, they're using strains that go back, whether it's an Acapulco Gold or a Maui Wowie or some of the other things that are so classically, 70s or maybe early 80s. But again, using these in a way that bring people back in. The thing that's really important too is there's, as I said earlier, there's just lots of psychological work that talks about the return to a certain point in our life. And I don't know about you, Adriana, or the listeners, but God, I still listen to the music that I listened to when I was 17 to probably 22, and haven't really moved much beyond that. Even though that's a pretty wide spectrum, I'm pretty much a man, a nostalgic man, looking back. So,
And what about your strains? Are you nostalgic with that also?
yes, to a certain degree. To a certain degree, the first strain I ever smoked on Halloween night, my senior year of high school, was Acapulco Gold, and recently came across that strain. And when consuming it, really tasted the earthiness, and it really brought me back. So I was surprised, and I think I was pleasantly surprised, and I think other people will be too. So I do think that's a hook that brand owners can use to bring previous consumers, or the boomerangs, as you call them, back. So, with just a couple of minutes left, I won't talk. I know we had gender up, but and let me talk about that very quickly. Gender-based brands are really coming into the fore right now. Gender, and that I think is happening because the research on cannabinoids are coming to a place where we're better able to understand some of the benefits, these specific benefits, and therefore benefit-specific products are being created. Cosmic View is a great example of products that are made for women. Angela Pye just created not too long ago a beverage called Gem and Jane, which is for women by women, which includes THCV, which is an appetite suppressant, and some other cannabinoids in there, which really appeal to women's needs. So there's lots going on as cannabinoids are just really being more recognized for specific benefits. And I think as this starts to happen, we'll be able to better understand how to take cannabinoids, create products, meaning specific form factors, that relate back to the consumer and their needs and their need states and their rituals. And so really, just to wrap this up and to come back to Lara's question about how do brand archetypes and consumer personas come together. If we know about a particular consumer and we know their habits, we know their need states, we know their rituals, we know their lifestyle, we can eventually get to a form factor that's meaningful for them. Is it a discrete form factor? Is it a microdosing form factor versus a blunt and something that would waft across wherever you are, would make you smell like weed if you were coming back into the office. So understanding the consumer and what they need and what they want, and supplying them with a brand that speaks to their needs. This is what we're talking about when we talk about a consumer persona and a brand archetype. And
Mm-hmm.
brand archetype is developed to fill the needs of the consumer and their persona and their lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. One thing that I love to see is I talk to a lot of people who founded their own company, and a lot of times it's based on there was a need for a specific product that didn't exist. So they had to invent it. So, in one example is Key Coco, which is also a gender brand, but it's also a wellness brand. And the founders were helping their friend deal with cancer treatment. And then so you make that for such a specific need, even for a specific person. And then it kind of catches on because it turns out that there's a lot of people who have that same need.
That's right. That's right. And really what it's all about is understanding, and we've gotten to this place, understanding that smoking is not the only way to consume cannabis, and that there's other ways to do it, and there's other healthier ways to do it. And there's places and points in time where, again, people can't smoke, even if they wanted to. So that's why we're coming to a place where we're not only understanding the consumers and their personas and their need states and rituals, but we're also developing brands that apply to their need states and really speak to them. And I think that's where we are, and it's a great place to be, because we're not all the same. Even though we consume the same plant, we consume it in different ways at different times, and our needs need to be addressed. And so I hope that, in today's conversation, we've been able to really lay out the personas, their need states, their rituals, and the brands that appeal to them. There's certainly more. I know there's more information both at ISA's website as well as my website, brandingbud.com. And I have chapters written about brand archetypes and consumer personas in my book as well.
Yeah.
I know we're coming out where we've really run out of time. We could talk about this for days, I'm sure.
Literally.
Yes. So that said, if there are any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We can be reached. Adriana and I could always be reached at through LinkedIn is probably the best. But we'd be happy to answer any more questions, and help people better understand how brand archetypes and consumer personas are linked together. And in understanding that, that will help not only brand owners, as well as retailers, really meet consumers and cannabis consumers where they are.
And thank you, Charlene, for your comment. Love the smart, intelligent conversations you bring to us every Friday. Much respect. Much respect to you, Charlene. And thank you also for including your name. Sometimes they don't pop up for me.
Thank you,
Happy Friday.
Right on. Well, we've certainly run long today, but the one thing that I would say is, if you're interested in a CANNAfact coming your way and the CANNAfact Friday newsletter, you can see the link up on the screen right now to sign up for our weekly newsletter and CANNAfact. We're here every Friday, and we're excited to be here every Friday. We've got some really great things coming up in the future. Next week is Rick Gillis, the president of Tinley, which is a cannabis-fused beverage based out of Long Beach, California. And we'll be very excited to speak with him about Tinley and some of the other projects they're working on.
Yeah, that'll be a good show. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. This was super fun. And thank you for bearing with us as we put a lot of information in front of you. I know it's kind of a lot for a Friday, but sometimes you just got to do it, right? So happy Friday. We survived another week, barely. So let's go out there and do great things.
That's right. Thank you, everybody. It's a great CANNAfact Friday, and we look forward to seeing you next week, again, with Rick Gillis, the president of Tinley. Until then, it's CANNAfact Friday.
Bye.